You want a fish tank, but still don't want to pay like insane amount of money for something that looks quite cool, I would say. So this right here is Antec CX500M addressable RGB, and addressable RGB is just for the fact because you have one 120 here at the back and two 120 on the side, which are already reverse blade. And this comes in play because this is already a, let's say, a pre-configured set for the fans, and they come quite interestingly connected because everything is daisy chained prior to assembling the whole chassis. They're connected with some proprietary 3-pin cable, and you can control the addressable RGB here on the side, which is quite easy and well, let's say straightforward, user-friendly for the addressable RGB if you don't have 5-volt 3-pin addressable RGB on your motherboard. But then again, you can connect it to your motherboard if you have that connector. In general, what you have to do with these fans is connect them with SATA power directly from the power supply to the connector at the back. Now, since I'm mentioning connectors and all the cables at the back, you do have to reorganize them a bit because the factory cable management isn't, well, it isn't that bad, but it isn't that good. It's somewhere in the middle. Nothing drastic to make you worry about buying this case and then you see a hideous cable management at the back. But still, if you're still aiming to go on a budget, but you still want to take care of your PC in the terms of visual aspect in front and at the back, you're going to reorganize them definitely. So in that sense, you can go really with huge amount of fans. And I'm saying this because this case, even though it's a micro ATX motherboard compatible case, you can go with a 360 radiator at the top. As you can see, I'm using here Vortex 360 addressable RGB, and then you have two on the side, one at the rear, and you can place three here as a reverse. Of course, one is going to have like 20% of the airflow because you have the power supply here. But then again, you have two additional ones right here. And if you're worrying about the GPU being very low, close to the fans, this is just because of the motherboard, because this motherboard that I have currently inside this build, and I think I explained that in prior videos, it has one problem, let's say so-called problem. The M.2 slot is right here above the GPU, and that's why the PCI slot is lower down. This brings us to the point where these fans on the power supply shroud for the additional intake are somewhat tricky part. Now, when we take those fans into consideration as an additional intake, it's really good because you have perforated steel here, perforated panel here on the side and on the front, and you have it on the side, back side, for those side fans. So if you're thinking of adding more airflow to the chassis, you don't have to worry about it because everything here is completely clean. And this also comes into consideration because you have loads of space. The whole power supply shroud is empty for cable management. So in that scenario, you have nice amount of space at the back for cable management as well. If you want to remove all the cables that are excessive, let's put it this way, from the power supply shroud just for the fans to intake everything here, and loads of those extrusions from the whole plate at the back to use zip ties and to nicely organize the cables. Now, in that sense, this case gives you an opportunity for 9 fans, and you can go with maximum 5 as an intake and 4 as an exhaust. GPU, well, basically, nothing is the limit. The only limit is this front tempered glass, because on the side you can't place a radiator because of the way the steel plate is designed. You can only go with those two 120 millimeter reverse blade fans, and all of the space right here is empty for your GPU. Talking about the GPU and the compatibility, you have 5 expansion slots here, and just to give you an idea, this is a 3 slot, yeah, definitely 3 slot RTX 4080 Super Gaming X Slim, which I went again with that one. In that scenario, you can really go with long and thick cards, specifically if you go with the mATX motherboard that supports PCI slot in the higher position than this. So you're occupying the first PCI expansion slot here in the motherboard. Now, when we're talking about IO ports, what you have is a power on button. It can be a reset button, but it is an RGB button. Then you have 3.5mm 4-pole jack for your microphone and for your headset, 2 USB 3.0 and 1 USB Type-C, which gives you just enough ports and buttons on the side for the I/O port. Talking about removing the side panels, in general, this side panel here doesn't have thumb screw. It's on very tight pegs on top, so you do have to push them out a bit stronger, but you have two indents here where the tempered glass sits, so it won't just burst when you're trying to try to pull it off. It won't fall from this ledge. It will still be held by these two. And of course, the front tempered glass can also slide out quite nicely, because on top it's held with pegs, so that's good. The top panel can't be removed, but you have a magnetic dust filter to place a 360 radiator, up to 360 radiator, and gives you still loads of access for the top ports. For the, well, EPS you do have to connect prior to this, because you really don't want to fiddle with that in any type of scenario in any other case. But PWM and addressable RGB are quite easy accessible, and you don't have to worry. Even with Vortex, you don't have to worry about the clearance for the RAMs or for the passive heatsink for the VRMs on the motherboard. And then we go at the back. You have one caddy for the 2.5-inch SSD. You have a caddy for the two 3.5-inch hard drives, or you can possibly go with one 3.5-inch hard drive, one 2.5-inch SSD, and, well, the power supply is basically the limit, the whole power supply shroud, because you can remove that cage and just gives you extra openings. The one thing that is, well, I won't say weird, but the opening here on the power supply shroud for the GPU cable is really far off. So in that scenario, I don't know. I mean, if you go with additional intake, I wouldn't even take that into consideration, because as you can see, I plugged in the cable from the bottom openings here near the motherboard, so that's that. It comes in black and white. The Type-C on the front is 3.2 generation 2x1. We have 4mm tempered glass on the front and on the side. On the top, you can go with 3 120 or 2 140mm fans. On the side, 2 120. Power supply shroud, 3 120, and rear 1 120. For the radiator mounting on top, you can go with 120, 140, 240, 280, 360. Clearance for the GPU maximum is 415 millimeters. Maximum CPU cooler height is 165, and maximum power supply length, as they stated, with including fans, is 210. With hard drive, without hard drive, is 270. And dust filters top and bottom, the bottom one is beneath the power supply. Now, let's go with benchmarks. Now, I did get some shock in terms of thermals. So when we go with the AIDA 64 Extreme Edition, I paired up 7900 X3D with RTX 4080 Gaming X Slim. Cooling down everything, well, basically the processor, is Vortex 360 addressable RGB. CPU went up to 91 degrees. That's the highest thermals that I got for this combination of CPU and this Vortex 360, because usually it went really lower. Clock speed 4875 megahertz, and the GPU went up to 71 degrees. This is, in general, I think I had 4 or 5 other cases that had 71 degrees. But if you go with 3 120 on the power supply shroud, the first one won't do that much, but the second and the third up on front for the tempered glass will definitely benefit the GPU with cool air, because these aren't angled by 45 degrees on the side, and this will give a nice intake for the bottom. I think then it would be from 66 to 68, and that would be quite ideal for, specifically for this GPU. But in general, when you take into consideration other GPUs and other thermals, it can lower down the thermals. And then the best part, we go to Cinebench. Now here we have different thermals. We have from 81 to 80, the average is 80.5 when we're taking into consideration these 10 runs. The clock speed is constant, 4925 megahertz, and the Cinebench score is 26,514, which is honestly in some same category when we take into consideration pairing up Vortex with 7900 X3D, which is outstanding. The only thing that is questionable is AIDA 64 with 91 degrees. But in general, when we take that into consideration, that's really good. As I said, this case could benefit even more when we're talking about the GPU thermals. If you add 3 more fans, they have the same design as these that are pre-installed, just don't have the same connection, so you have to connect them individually, PWM and addressable RGB, and those are P12R addressable RGB fans. When you take into consideration everything, taking the price, the thickness of the steel, it's not that fantastic as in terms of their premium cases. Let's be honest. And this is where they slash the price. But if you want something nice, compact, because let's be honest, mATX motherboards are compact, specifically if you go with this type of case, we have smaller, of course, don't get me wrong. But when we take the price into consideration and the performance in general, if you fill up the case with all the fans, it's all right. But that does bring up the altogether price, because you do need to pay for AIO is quite normal. You can go with air cooler up to 165, but you definitely should add at least 2 fans here on the front for the GPU, which GPU thermals would benefit in general. In visual aspect, the case looks outstanding. You have enough storage, and the cool thing, you can fit a 360 radiator even thicker than this one, because you have enough clearance for everything. So even though this case doesn't go into the premium segment of the Antec in general, what they've been doing lately, I think it's still a good case if you're on the budget. And that's all that I can say for today, guys. CX500M addressable RGB. If this thing suits your needs, what you're aiming currently, you can pair it up with Vortex 360 addressable RGB. And for the sake of going completely Antec, I placed the HCG 1000 Platinum, even though it's not needed. You can clearly go with 850 watts and you'll be good to go with this scenario. But I had this power supply free for this build, so yeah, I placed it and configured it as it is. So guys, thanks for watching today's video. The links are in the description as I stated. And finally, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, click the notification bell for future content coming quite shortly. Bye bye.